Hi, folks. In this video, we look at the existential situation of the characters in BoJack Horseman. Now, over the half dozen seasons of the show, there's actually a huge number of threads and subplots with existential significance that have been developed. So I highly recommend people check out the rest of this show. It's really a philosophical treasure trove. I just want to look at a few of the central characters in this video. So I'll talk a little bit about Princess Carolyn, Todd, BoJack, and Diane, and see what kind of situations they're in. Oh, and Mr. Peanut Butter too. We can't leave him out. So I'll start with BoJack. Obviously, BoJack is a character who's not an exemplar of authentic living. He is classically in a sort of situation of despair. He is divided against himself and haunted by his past success. He's seemingly a person who has everything, who has a lot of money. He's living in one of the most beautiful places, the most wonderful weather you can have. Everybody would love to live in a place like Southern California if they could afford it. He's got all of the money and all of the past success, and yet he is haunted by it. He just moves from one form of self-abuse or substance abuse to another. So I'll talk more in these videos about BoJack's particular state of despair, but let me say that unequivocally he's living a life of despair. The same thing I think is true for most of the other characters in the show, so that's why it's such a philosophically interesting movie. It's a bit like the Brothers Karamazov in the sense we have characters in all their own ways working out different forms of despair. Todd can't find success in life. In a sense, he's the flip side of BoJack, and yet still he is in a state of despair. He struggles with his personal relationships. He struggles with his own sexuality. He can't find success. He's sort of a deadbeat kid living on BoJack's couch who's constantly arguing and fighting with BoJack. And yet we see beneath that they have the seeds of friendship and love between them, if only they could figure out throughout the series a way of realizing it. Okay, how about Princess Caroline? I think she's just as unhappy as the rest of the characters, and she's having to work it out in a very different way. This theme comes up right at the beginning of the series where she's confidently able to be a professional woman, and she can balance her personal life and professional life. But we see in one iteration after another and one subplot after another that Princess Caroline is completely unable to do this. And the way in which the show really depicts her struggles with professional life and motherhood really develops her character later on in a very interesting way. So I think she is equally in a state of despair. She is deeply struggling to find success, both personally and professionally, and it keeps eluding her. I think she's in a different state than the other characters, but it's still another version of despair. I think the exact same thing is true of Diane. Diane is tortured by her lack of professional success. She has a family that does not provide her acknowledgement and support and success. She has various relationships, with BoJack, with Mr. Peanut Butter. None of them provide her fulfillment and success. And so I think she's yet another version of a character who cannot find authenticity, but is deeply seeking after it and is looking for something in life. Okay, lastly, I guess the one true anomaly here is what the heck is up with Mr. Peanut Butter? He is the wonderful counterpoint to every other character in the show because he seemingly is not in despair, although it's almost incomprehensible to the other characters. I mean, he's, as he says, living the dream, PC, and it's not true. It's not exactly obvious that he's being ironic here whatsoever. He is simply being the person who is actually happy in life. But he seems like, BoJack has the most wonderful line that he's so stupid he doesn't realize how miserable he should be because seemingly he's not miserable. So is what the show telling us actually that ignorance is bliss? What we actually just have to do is forget about our troubles and we can be as happy as Mr. Peanut Butter. His character, I think, provides a wonderful counterpoint because it highlights the troubles of the other characters and their and our inability to really discover if Mr. Peanut Butter truly has it all or not. He starts out in a relationship with Diane, and BoJack, who didn't realize this, then goes on the barfing spree. And of course, irony is what this show is so good at. So BoJack, we can see the devastation, just the fact that he can't figure out how to live in the world and find meaning in his relationships with his friends or others. And this is a perfect example of it. So, so I think and another thing, this sounds like a pretty depressing show. Like, we have all these various forms of despair and depression and substance abuse that the characters engage in. So what makes it such an interesting, fun show? I think really it's the use of humor. I mean, BoJack says this about his own show. It's funny on every level, he says, talking about Horsing Around, the fictional show inside the fiction. And I think it's really essential to understand the depth of the show by seeing how Horsing Around provides a way of a type of meta commentary on the BoJack Horseman show. So I think the writers and the filmmakers of this series are doing the exact same thing Dostoevsky was, which is providing this level of metafiction, which adds a whole nother layer of interest and complexity to it. I mean, we see this in many places. BoJack is in this interview with Charlie Rose, and he says, I think the show is pretty solid for what it is. I know it's not Ibsen. I mean, clearly the writers of BoJack are slightly poking fun at themselves because they're making a cartoon which is taking itself seriously and trying to engage in deep issues. So this is a way of, in a sense, poking fun at themselves by also poking fun at, the 80s family sitcom drama. Okay, let me say something else about BoJack's character in this video. So what I want you to do, pause your videos here and think about who BoJack is like. Can we get a sense of what his type of despair is in relation to all the other fictional characters and films that we've looked at in this course? So pause your videos and try to reflect on this. Find some characters who are in similar situations as BoJack, you think, from an existential point of view. Okay, that was your chance to pause your videos. And what I think is, BoJack has two halves of himself, and he cannot get them into reconciliation. That is his form of despair. He berates himself, just like Dmitry Karamazov. He knows he should be better. He knows he needs something in his life. He's seeking for meaning, and yet he can't possibly get it. And, Dmitry goes around in debt to everyone. That debt is a symbol for Dimitri's spiritual indebtedness and the lack of reconciliation he can find. I think BoJack is acutely aware of his own debts too. It's not financial debt to others. In a sense, it's relationship debt. What he takes from everybody else, he drains on them. He sucks life out of them for himself, and he knows he is doing it. And yet he can't reconcile himself with it. He can't get into the right relationships to acknowledge others and find fulfillment. He can't heal his soul, and yet he feels like he needs to. That's exactly the state of Grushenka and Dmitry. In many ways, it's also the state of Eleanor in The Good Place. She's a bad person and she knows it. That's the same existential situation as Garcin in Sartre's No Exit. So this, I think, is characteristic of BoJack's despair, and it starts to give us a sense of maybe what BoJack does need in order to heal his soul. So in other videos, what we're going to look at is how BoJack could possibly get out of despair, because seemingly, he gets nominated for an Oscar. This is one of the subplots that gets developed later on in the series, and it doesn't help. He still has no fulfillment. BoJack needs something to heal his soul. I guess the question for us to try to figure out is, what is it? Okay, thanks.